President Trump is now threatening this new investigation I just discussed involving Epstein. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is remarkable, I would argue, Pamela. And Wolf, I'll note as well that I believe he's posting these from the residence. I don't see a Marine outside the West Wing, so it doesn't appear he's doing this from the Oval Office. But look, he is threatening now to ask his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, as well as the FBI, to open investigations into some of his political opponents.
Okay, so this is the moment that could end Trump's legal defense completely. During a critical trial session, a private investigator played a recording, a tape of Trump talking about classified documents, and what Trump said on that tape is devastating. Absolutely devastating. Trump admitted, in his own words, that he had classified documents after leaving office, that he knew they were still classified, that he couldn't declassify them anymore because he was no longer president, and he showed these documents to other people anyway. That's Trump confessing to the crimes he's charged with, in his own voice, on tape. And when the recording played in court, the entire jury audibly gasped. That's how shocking and damaging this evidence is. The jury couldn't believe what they were hearing. Trump admitting everything, destroying his own defense. And legal experts are saying this single recording could be case-breaking evidence that guarantees conviction. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. The specific words Trump said on the tape are damning. He said, "This is secret information. As president, I could have declassified it, but now I can't." That's Trump admitting multiple things that destroy his defense. First, he's admitting the documents are still classified. They're secret information. Second, he's admitting he no longer has authority to declassify them because he's not president anymore. Third, he's acknowledging that showing these documents to people is problematic because they're classified. And fourth, he's doing it anyway. He's showing classified documents to unauthorized people while knowing he shouldn't. That's confession of criminal conduct. That's Trump admitting he knew what he was doing was wrong and doing it anyway. That's criminal intent. That's knowledge. That's everything prosecutors need to prove to convict him. Trump's entire defense strategy has been built on claiming everything was declassified. His lawyers have been arguing that Trump declassified all the documents before leaving office, that everything at Mar-a-Lago was declassified, that Trump had authority to declassify and he did it, so there's no crime. But this recording destroys that defense because Trump himself says the documents are still classified, that he can't declassify them now. That shows Trump's own lawyers have been lying, or at least making arguments Trump himself knows are false. And juries don't like that. When they catch defendants in lies, when they hear defendants contradicting their own defense, conviction becomes almost inevitable. The jury's reaction tells you everything you need to know about how powerful this evidence is. Audible gasps that almost never happens in courtrooms. Jurors are trained to remain impassive, to not show reactions. But this recording was so shocking that jurors couldn't help themselves. They gasped.
Just getting out of the courtroom, Caitlin, you were inside, you listened to all those arguments. So what happened during the hearing?
Well, Wolf and Pam, I was listening very closely to how Judge Cameron McGowan Curry was going to handle this hearing. And she's a laid-back questioner, a very concise questioner. But boy, it was a grilling of the Justice Department, if I have ever seen one before from a judge like this.
And courtroom witnesses describe what happened next as a complete meltdown for Trump's legal team. Trump's lawyers reportedly went into crisis mode, emergency sidebar conferences with the judge, frantic note passing among the defense table, because they knew immediately that this recording destroyed their case, that there's no coming back from the defendant confessing on tape. Legal analysts who reviewed the tape and the courtroom reaction are unanimous. This changes everything. One analyst said Trump's strategy falls apart when jurors and the public hear him contradict his own defense in his own voice. This could turn reasonable doubt into conviction. That's the key point. Defense strategy in criminal cases is all about creating reasonable doubt, making jurors think maybe the defendant didn't know it was illegal. Maybe there's an innocent explanation. Maybe the prosecution hasn't proven their case beyond reasonable doubt. But when you have the defendant on tape admitting he knew documents were classified, admitting he couldn't declassify them, and showing them to people anyway, there's no reasonable doubt. That's a confession. And juries convict on confessions. Prosecutors are already planning how to use this recording to strengthen their case. They're going to play it over and over in opening statements, during witness testimony, in closing arguments. They're going to make this recording the centerpiece of their case, and they're going to use it to prove obstruction, evidence tampering, and intentional misconduct charges. because the recording doesn't just show Trump had classified documents, it shows he knew they were classified, that he knew showing them was wrong, and that he did it anyway. That's clear knowledge and intent. That's exactly what prosecutors need for conviction. Trump's lawyers are reportedly going to challenge the recording's admissibility. They'll argue it was obtained improperly, that it violates attorney-client privilege, that it's taken out of context, anything to keep it away from the jury. But legal experts say it's probably too late. The jury already heard it. You can't unhear something like that. Even if the judge eventually rules the recording inadmissible and tells the jury to disregard it, the damage is done. Jurors heard Trump confess, and that's going to influence their verdict, no matter what legal technicalities get argued later. And this isn't just affecting the trial. The recording has gone viral on social media and news outlets. Everyone is talking about it. The moment the jury gasped what Trump said, how devastating it is for his defense. This is dominating news cycles, and it's politically damaging too, because undecided voters are hearing Trump admit he mishandled classified information, that he knew it was wrong, that he did it anyway, and that erodes support, makes people question his fitness for office, makes them think if he admitted to crimes on tape, maybe all the other allegations are true too. So yeah, this is the moment, the recording that could end Trump's legal defense and potentially his political career. Trump caught on tape admitting he had classified documents, knew they were classified, couldn't declassify them, and show them to people anyway. The jury gasping in shock, Trump's lawyers in meltdown, and prosecutors planning to use this as the centerpiece of a conviction strategy. This is the kind of evidence that ends criminal cases, and it just got played in court for everyone to hear. All right, let's dig into why this recording is so legally devastating and what it means for Trump's classified documents case, because understanding the specific legal elements prosecutors have to prove helps explain why Trump's own words on this tape could guarantee conviction. The classified documents case against Trump has several elements prosecutors must prove beyond reasonable doubt. First, that Trump unlawfully retained national defense information. Second, that he knew the documents were classified and that retaining them was illegal. Third, that he willfully refused to return the documents when asked. And fourth, that he obstructed justice by hiding documents from investigators. Each of these elements requires proving Trump's knowledge and intent, and that's usually the hard part of criminal cases, proving what the defendant knew and what they intended. But this recording provides direct evidence of Trump's knowledge and intent in his own words. Let's start with unlawful retention. The recording has Trump discussing secret information. That's Trump acknowledging the documents contain classified national defense information. He's not calling them personal records or declassified materials. He's calling them secret information. That admission establishes that Trump knew he possessed classified documents, and possession of classified documents after leaving office without authorization is unlawful. So Trump's own description of the documents as secret information helps prove the first element. Now, knowledge and intent. This is where the recording is most devastating. Trump says, as president, I could have declassified it, but now I can't. That statement proves several things. First, Trump understands that documents need to be declassified before they can be shared. Second, Trump acknowledges he no longer has authority to declassify because he's not president. Third, Trump is admitting the documents he's discussing are still classified. He hasn't declassified them. They remain secret. And fourth, Trump is aware that showing classified documents to unauthorized people is wrong. Otherwise, why would he be talking about his inability to declassify them? All of that shows knowledge and intent. Trump knew the documents were classified. He knew he shouldn't show them to unauthorized people. He knew he didn't have authority to declassify them anymore. And the recording apparently captures him showing the documents anyway, or discussing having shown them. That's willful violation of classification laws. That's criminal intent, and is proven by Trump's own words. The willful retention element is also addressed by the recording, because if Trump knew the documents were classified and knew he shouldn't have them but kept them anyway, that's willful retention. The recording shows Trump understood these documents were classified, yet he kept them at Mar-a-Lago. He showed them to people. He didn't return them when subpoenaed. All of that is willful retention. And again, proven by Trump's own admission that he knew the documents were classified. The obstruction element gets strengthened too, because the recording shows Trump was discussing classified documents with people who shouldn't have access. That suggests Trump was trying to use the documents for some purpose rather than just accidentally keeping them. And when the government asked for documents back, Trump's response was to hide some, to move boxes, to have his lawyer falsely certify that all classified documents had been returned. All of that obstruction is more serious when you can prove Trump knew the documents were classified. And this recording proves exactly that. Trump's defense strategy has been to claim everything was declassified. His lawyers filed motions arguing Trump had broad declassification authority, that he declassified everything before leaving office, that the documents at Mar-a-Lago were his personal property, not classified national security materials. and that Trump believed in good faith, he was allowed to keep them. But this recording destroys every part of that defense, because Trump himself says the documents are still classified, that he can't declassify them. That contradicts his lawyer's arguments. And it shows Trump knew the documents were classified even while his lawyers were claiming everything was declassified. Juries hate that. They hate catching defendants in lies, and this recording is going to feel like a lie to jurors. Trump's lawyers spent months arguing everything was declassified, and then jurors hear Trump on tape saying the documents are still secret, that he can't declassify them. That's the defendant contradicting his own defense, and juries interpret that as proof the defendant is guilty and trying to hide it. That reasonable doubt disappears, and conviction becomes almost inevitable. The context in which the recording was made matters too. This apparently wasn't Trump talking to his lawyers in a privileged conversation. This was Trump talking to other people, possibly journalists or guests at Mar-a-Lago, based on typical reporting about how Trump showed documents to visitors. That means there's no privilege protecting the recording. It's admissible evidence, and the people Trump was talking to can be called as witnesses to authenticate the recording and provide context about what Trump showed them. The private investigator who obtained the recording probably did so legally. Either someone who was present during the conversation provided it, or it was found during discovery in the civil case that became the source material for the criminal case. Either way, if the recording was obtained legally, it's admissible, and Trump's lawyers will have a hard time keeping it away from the jury. They'll try to argue it's prejudicial, that it's taken out of context, that it violates some privilege. But if the recording is authentic and legally obtained, judges typically allow it, because it's direct evidence of the defendant's state of mind, and that's exactly what's at issue in this case. The jury's reaction is also legally significant, not for admissibility purposes, but for what it tells us about the impact of the evidence. When an entire jury gasps audibly, that means the evidence hit home. They understood immediately what they were hearing. They recognized it as devastating to the defense, and that reaction suggests these jurors are going to remember this recording. It's going to be the centerpiece of their deliberations. When they go into the jury room to decide guilt or innocence, this recording is going to be what they discuss first, and it's probably going to be what convinces any holdouts to vote for conviction. Courtroom witnesses describing a complete meltdown for Trump's legal team tells us the lawyers knew immediately how bad this was. Experienced criminal defense lawyers can usually maintain composure even when bad evidence comes in. They're trained to not react, to keep fighting. But if Trump's lawyers visibly melted down, that suggests they knew this recording destroyed their case, that there's no effective response, that they're going to lose, and that kind of visible despair from defense counsel can influence a jury too. If the defendant's own lawyers seem to think the case is lost, jurors pick up on that. The recording is also damaging because it shows Trump's mindset. He's not treating classified information with respect or care. He's showing it to people as a way to impress them or make a point. That cavalier attitude toward national security is going to upset jurors because most Americans, including jurors, understand that classified information needs to be protected, that it's classified for a reason, and Trump treating it like a toy or a prop to show off with is going to make jurors angry, and angry jurors convict. Prosecutors are going to emphasize all of this in their closing argument. They're going to play the recording again. They're going to break down Trump's words, show how each phrase proves knowledge and intent, point out that Trump's own words contradict his defense. And they're going to argue that when you hear the defendant confess on tape, there's no reasonable doubt. You have to convict. That's a powerful closing argument, and it's built entirely on Trump's own words. Trump's lawyers are going to try to minimize the damage. They'll argue the recording is taken out of context, that Trump was just bragging or exaggerating, that he didn't really show classified documents to anyone, that the whole thing was a joke or Trump being Trump. But those arguments are weak because the recording sounds genuine, Trump sounds serious, and even if he was exaggerating, he's admitting he has classified documents he can't declassify. That admission alone is enough for conviction, regardless of whether he actually showed them in that specific moment. Okay, let's break this down. Point 1. The recording captures Trump stating the documents are secret information and that he can no longer declassify them now that he's not president. This is a direct admission that the documents remain classified after Trump left office. That destroys Trump's main defense strategy, which has been claiming everything was declassified. When the defendant admits on tape that documents are still classified, the declassification defense falls apart completely, and juries will see that as Trump lying through his lawyers while knowing the truth. Point 2. Trump's words prove he had knowledge. The documents were classified and that showing them to unauthorized people was wrong. Knowledge and intent are the hardest elements for prosecutors to prove in criminal cases. But this recording provides direct evidence of both. Trump says the documents are secret, that he can't declassify them. That means he knows they're classified, and he's discussing them in context of showing them to people. That means he knows what he's doing is problematic. That's criminal knowledge and intent, proven by Trump's own admission. Point 3. The jury's audible gasp and stunned silence shows how powerful and unexpected the evidence was. Juries are trained to stay impassive. They're told not to react visibly to evidence. But this recording was so shocking that jurors couldn't help themselves. They gasped. That tells us this evidence hit hard, that jurors immediately understood how damaging it is to Trump's case, and that reaction suggests these jurors are very likely to convict based on this recording. Point 4. Courtroom witnesses described a complete meltdown for Trump's legal team after the tape played. Experienced defense lawyers usually maintain composure even when bad evidence comes in, but Trump's lawyers reportedly went into crisis mode, emergency sidebars, frantic note passing. That visible panic tells us the lawyers knew immediately that this recording destroyed their case, and that kind of despair from defense counsel can influence a jury. If the defendant's own lawyers seem to think the case is lost, jurors pick up on that. Point 5. Legal analysts say Trump's strategy falls apart when jurors hear him contradict his own defense in his own voice. This is the key legal point. Defense strategy is built on creating reasonable doubt, but when the defendant confesses on tape, reasonable doubt disappears. Trump's lawyers have been arguing everything was declassified, but Trump says on tape that the documents are still secret, still classified. That contradiction destroys the defense, and juries will interpret that as proof Trump is guilty and has been lying about it. Point 6. The recording could turn reasonable doubt into conviction, according to multiple legal experts. This is the bottom line. Criminal defendants are supposed to get the benefit of the doubt. If evidence is ambiguous, juries should lean toward acquittal, but confession evidence eliminates ambiguity. When you hear the defendant admit the crime on tape, there's no doubt, and that almost always results in conviction. Legal experts across the political spectrum are saying this recording has that impact. It's confession evidence that makes conviction nearly inevitable. Point 7. Prosecutors plan to use the recording to strengthen obstruction, evidence tampering, and intentional misconduct charges. Because the recording doesn't just prove unlawful retention of classified documents, it proves Trump knew what he was doing was wrong, and that knowledge elevates the charges. Obstruction becomes easier to prove when you can show the defendant knew the documents were classified and hid them anyway. Evidence tampering becomes easier to prove when the defendant admits he knew he shouldn't have the documents. And intentional misconduct is proven by Trump's own words, acknowledging the documents are secret but showing them anyway. Point 8. Trump's lawyers will likely challenge the recording's admissibility, but experts say the damage is already done. Defense lawyers always try to exclude damaging evidence. They'll argue the recording was obtained improperly, that it violates privilege, that it's taken out of context. But even if they eventually succeed in getting it excluded, the jury already heard it. You can't unhear a confession. Even if the judge tells jurors to disregard the recording, it's going to influence their verdict because they heard Trump admit everything, and that's not something jurors forget. Point 9. The moment has gone viral on social media and news outlets, fueling debate about Trump's fitness for office. This isn't just affecting the trial. The recording and the jury's reaction are all over social media. News networks are playing the audio. Analysts are dissecting Trump's words. And voters are hearing Trump admit he mishandled classified information. That's politically devastating because it reinforces every negative narrative about Trump, that he's careless with national security, that he lies constantly, that he thinks he's above the law. And undecided voters hearing this are likely to turn against Trump. Point 10. This could be case-breaking evidence that decides not only this case, but shapes 2025 election narratives, because conviction in the classified documents case would have enormous political consequences. Trump would be a convicted felon, he'd potentially face prison time, and he'd have to campaign while dealing with sentencing and potential incarceration. That's almost impossible to overcome politically. So if this recording leads to conviction, as legal experts expect, it could effectively end Trump's political career. And even if Trump isn't convicted until after the election, the recording itself becomes a campaign issue. Democrats will play it in ads. They'll ask voters, do you really want to elect someone who admitted on tape that he mishandled classified information? That's a devastating political attack. So where does this leave us? A private investigator played a recording in court that captures Trump admitting he had classified documents, knew they were still classified, knew he couldn't declassify them anymore, and showed them to people anyway. The jury gasped audibly at what they heard. Trump's lawyers went into crisis mode, and legal experts are saying this single recording could be case-breaking evidence that guarantees conviction. Trump's entire defense strategy just collapsed. His lawyers have been arguing everything was declassified, but Trump says on tape the documents are still secret. That contradiction is fatal. Juries will see it as Trump lying through his lawyers while knowing the truth, and that destroys reasonable doubt. When you hear the defendant confess on tape, conviction becomes almost inevitable. The political consequences are equally severe. The recording is viral. Everyone is talking about it, and voters are hearing Trump admit to mishandling classified information. That reinforces every negative narrative about Trump, and likely cost him support among undecided voters. This could shape the entire 2025 election narrative. Trump as the candidate caught on tape confessing the crimes. That's not an image you recover from easily. This is the moment. The recording that could end Trump's legal defense and damage his political future irreparably. Trump caught in his own words, admitting everything prosecutors need to convict him. The jury gasping in shock. Legal experts unanimous that this is case-breaking evidence, and the entire country watching as Trump's carefully constructed defenses crumble in the face of his own recorded confession.